This is a good talk for the end of the day because you're not going to have to deal with syntax. We're talking about concepts, ideas. This talk is as much about improving your career as a software developer as it is about just improving your life itself. You're going to see how these things apply in both ways. I want to start off with a quote from the great Rich Hick, who said that programmers know the benefits of everything and the trade-offs of nothing. And this is obviously hyperbole, but I will say early in my career, I was certainly guilty of saying things like nevers and always, and those are the kinds of signs where somebody's not thinking in terms of trade-offs. If you don't know the trade-offs of the decision you're about to make, that's a real risk. So we're going to talk about trade-offs in this talk, and what I want to share is 10 software laws, and these are laws that I found helpful for spotlighting trade-offs. Some of these you've probably heard of, other of these you haven't before, and I want to share some particular examples of how, yes, they help you write better software, but yeah, also they're just useful in life itself. So to begin, I want to start with my favorite, which is the first law of ecology, which says that you can never merely do one thing. And this is something that's on my mind a lot. So I'm a father, a husband. I'm from Kansas City, the middle of the United States. So I chose to fly all the way over here, and that means for the last 5 days, I haven't seen my kids, I haven't seen my wife, I kind of miss them. That's the trade-off I'm making, but I also really wanted to be here. You can never change one thing. Because I'm here, my relationship with them, if it's a chart, it went down a little bit because you can't get that time back, but my career hopefully goes up a little bit. There's always this yin-yang back and forth happening in life and in code. When somebody says, do this thing, you should always do this thing, they're forgetting the trade that's there. So this right here, what you're experiencing, is an example of trade-offs. I had never spoken in public outside of a course that was required back in college. And in 2010, this was the way I felt on stage, and that's precisely why I decided to submit to a conference. I thought, what is something that sounds most terrifying that I'd like to get over? And the nature of life is, if you have fears, you can choose to hide from them, or you can choose to run like straight at them. So what I decided to do was submit to a local conference in my hometown, KCDC. Anybody in here been there? I know a few here that have. There we go, at least one hand. So very similar to NDC, about 2,000 people. Now back when I went, it was much smaller. And I remember giving my first talk, and I was just talking about just general clean coding practices, and I got up there and I presented it, and it was kind of a blur. And in summary, I didn't die. That was what I could say. It wasn't great, it wasn't horrible, something in between. And honestly, you got up there and it was just sort of blurred, but I decided, after that was okay. I could try this again, and maybe I can get better at it, and then maybe some point I could actually enjoy it. Now, you fast forward to today. I mean, that's 15 years ago, but I'm being honest with you when I tell you, I can stand up here today, and I'm as comfortable here as I am if you and I are one-on-one having a coffee. And that is a bizarre thing to say if you knew me in 2010. So, I encourage you, if there's something that's holding you back that you feel like is a constant fear, one thing you can do is ask, what would somebody that didn't have this fear do? What is a step to take me closer? And the thing that's interesting is, again, that first law of ecology, you can't change just one thing. After I got comfortable doing public speaking, I found my career started to really accelerate because suddenly I could be in a conversation with an executive, with my boss, with my coworkers. I could be in a room of a bunch of people, and that felt low stakes because that doesn't seem scary anymore when you've stood in front of hundreds of people and had your phone alarm go off for who knows why. Stop. Although it does remind me, I do like to get selfies. This is very important business, everybody. I forgot to do this in my other session, and I mean, if I'm flying across the pond, I can't even get you all. There's too many people. Can we put our hands up like we're at an amusement park? That's just more fun. I want to get this angle. Yeah. Oh, over here too. I'm sure that'll stitch real smooth. Yeah, no worries there. Okay, so what I was saying, though, I really do feel that way. I can feel as comfortable in this situation as a one-on-one. And it's just a matter of if something is hard, do it more often. This is also true with a production deployment. I am embarrassed to say this, but years ago I was a team lead, And we went multiple nights in a row failing to deploy to production. We got there and it was manual and we didn't have tests and things would break along the way and we didn't script it out well. I was very young in my career. And that thing that was hard, we decided to do it more often until we got good at it. Rather than running from it, you'll find companies that'll do that. Maybe we should deploy once a quarter because deployment is hard. That's not great. That's running from your fears instead of getting better. So today, this was actually quite a few years ago, but this was a really cool moment. I found myself in San Francisco at Fluent Conference, and this was me teaching React right when React had come out. I had 300 people in the room with their laptops learning React. Like, it was really surreal, and I thought, that just didn't seem like something that could have been reality, but it was because I chased this thing. So you can't change only one thing. There's butterfly effects to anything you do, and that's why I'm here today. Another example, when I graduated college, Microsoft was probably the most exciting place that I could imagine having a job. And it was, you think about people have goals and they got a mountain that they're going toward, and I was working at various companies and trying to create a career where maybe one day I could have that opportunity. And I found that opportunity 7 years ago. I got offered a job at Microsoft, and I couldn't believe it, and I was so excited. But also at that same moment was when I was publishing courses, and I was doing training and consulting on the side, and I had a job as a principal engineer, which effectively meant my job was to level up all developers in a large organization, and I loved it. I had the level of autonomy that I didn't know was possible, to the point that I would talk to my boss once a month, and when I'd talk to him, he'd say things like, "So anything you need from me? Things are going well. I'm hearing good stuff. I really like what you're doing over here. What are you planning next?" Like, he just let me run with it because he could see I loved my job. He knew he could trust me. And if people continued to say I was doing good things, it made him look good. So that was great. So going to Microsoft was a very scary thing to do. I was already in a 9 out of 10 job. Would that be a 10 out of 10? The other thing that I knew was I always wanted to be independent. I always wanted to be a consultant. I wanted to train and do sort of what I'm doing here, but for companies. So I ended up passing on this. And I don't know. I don't know what might have been. I may have been happier there. I may have had an amazing career, but at this point, what is, I will say, the last few years have been unbelievable. My enjoyment of independence has been everything that I thought it would be, and I knew about the downsides going in, and it turned out the downsides, at least for me, were worth it. But boy, there are upsides and there are downsides. I love the freedom. I love being able to be anywhere. I didn't have to ask anybody permission to be here this week. So I get to travel around to conferences all the time. My office at home is exactly the way I want it to be. I have my equipment. I don't have to run anything on there that I don't want. I choose all my own tech all the time. You get sort of a halo, too, which is really cool. When you're in a company giving advice and they paid you for that advice, they tend to listen because they go, "Well, I did pay you for it, so maybe we should." But there's all sorts of downsides. People say, "Oh, wouldn't it be great to be your own boss?" Well, you're certainly not your own boss in this case. I actually just have more bosses than you do. I have a lot of different people that I need to answer to because I'm getting paid by multiple places. But it is really exciting. I just want to be honest about the trade-offs. It's not for everybody, but I have loved it. So this first law of ecology, remember, everything is interconnected. And so related to that, I want to shift back to software for a second. Shipley's 6 dimensions are 6 different ways that you can think about software quality. And I deliberately show these because recognize that these are all sort of a more complex way of talking about the iron triangle. Good, fast, cheap, pick 2. Think about if you make your software more featureful, then you're probably going to find that the speed of execution might go down. If you make it more flexible, then you might find that the brevity of code almost certainly goes down. You can see how all of these pull at one another. So these are all trade-offs, and when you've got to be really careful because any individual on the team can get hyper-focused on one thing. We've got to make this as fast as we can make it, and then because of that, other things fall down. It's all sort of spinning plates. We have to balance these things. So the risk is myopic focus. In software interviews, sometimes I like to ask, so tell me, how do you feel about test coverage? And if somebody says, oh, I always write 100% test coverage, I have a hard time believing that. Really? Do you? And do you honestly think you should? And if you were paying developers to do that, is that what you would tell them to do out of your own pocket? Because it's diminishing returns. Maybe it's worth it, maybe it's not. LLMs also change this game. But all of these things on this list are a myopic focus. I mean, I will say, I've had a myopic focus earlier in my career on having beautiful code. I really wanted to be super proud of it. But I can tell you, my boss at my last full-time job, which again was 6-7 years ago, he ultimately sold the business for $120 million. And I can tell you, he did not care about code quality. He cared about shipping features. And he told us all the time, he's like, it's good enough, just ship it. Stop polishing this stuff, guys. We just need the feature. And he would go back to the hotel early in his career and just quickly jam out a feature and then go back and do a demo and say, here, see, it works. It's not perfect, but it's good enough. Let's do a deal. So there's lots of ways to be successful in software. Other examples of trade-offs. Think about, I was at a conference back when TypeScript had first been released, and someone made the claim, he said, well, everybody should use TypeScript. There's no reason not to. You just should. And I go, really? Like, we finally found a technology that doesn't have downsides? Now, I'm a big fan of TypeScript. I just published 2 courses on it over on DomeTrain, but there's a lot of cost to it. There are downsides. I recognize. I think those downsides are absolutely worth it. I'm happy to pay this cost, but it is not free. There is no free lunch. Specialization is something that I really believe in. And when I chose this, that was one of the hardest decisions of my career. So I worked in C# for 10 years. And then I came to the opportunity to go big on one thing, and that was React. And I decided, okay, I'm going to sort of step away from C# and .NET and just be focused on the front end and try to be as good as I possibly can at that. Because I thought, I can try to be world-class at this thing, but I certainly can't be world-class at very much more. There's too many things to keep track of. And also, I can be something interesting and specific rather than something really broad where nobody really thinks of me as somebody that stands out in anywhere. So these are the benefits of specialization, but it's higher risk, it's fewer options, it's certainly more travel because it means I have to go where the business is. I probably can't find enough opportunity in just my hometown. And at any given point, you may bet on Silverlight. Who knows what tech you might choose that doesn't quite play out. I mean, early on in my career, the very first tech I chose was Flash. And I was really good at Flash until Steve Jobs showed up. And then my skills were less useful. I had to move on. I pivoted many times over the years. Now, I just talked about specialization and the use of it, and I'm a big fan of being a specialist, but I also want to mention the book Range. Now, I've read both these books, and what's great about reading lots of books is you start realizing that 2 books that disagree with one another can both be right. They're just coming at things from different angles, and they're pointing out trade-offs, because this book, Essentialism, is fantastic, and I recommend this book more than any other book to people. Even my son in high school read it and enjoyed it. It asks a simple question. Stop asking, how can you do it all? And instead start asking, what do I want to go big on? And again, I decided I wanted to go big on being independent and being a front-end specialist, trying to be world-class in React, just a popular framework that was new, and that really worked out well for me. So I published courses, trained people, went to lots of conferences. But this book on the right, Range, that's taking the opposite idea, and it says, hey, generalists really do have power, and it's true. You can't be this one thing. Like, if I want to be a CTO, being really good at this one technology is not very useful. You've got to have breadth as well. So to balance this, people talk about the T-shaped developer. What that means is, early in your career, what I would suggest is, taste as much ice cream as you can. Try all these different technologies. Say yes to as many things as you can, and then at some point, look around and ask, what is this combination of the thing I enjoyed and the thing that I think I could be really good at? And then I'm going to pursue that. And what's the opportunity around me? For me, I was on a .NET team, and all of us enjoyed C# and all of us hated JavaScript. Everybody hated JavaScript. And I said, all right, I'll just be the JavaScript guy. I actually agree. I'd rather be working in C#, but I'm going to be the JavaScript guy, and I'm going to help lead others and make that better. And that really accelerated my career because I got a lot of opportunities because nobody else wanted to take that work. So that can be one way to go. Security is another trade-off. People will say, I want it as secure as possible. Well, no, you don't. Like, if you crank security up to 10, you can't do anything. Like, we're always taking trade-offs on security. The security at the airport could be even more secure, but we like to keep our clothes on. So they sacrifice some of that, and they use systems and these sorts of things. There's all sorts of ways that you could take these things too far. Another example is a monorepo. This one seems to be a religious sort of thing. Some people just love monorepos, and other people have used them and learned to hate them. That tends to be often the case. They sound like this wonderful solution, and then you start to realize, again, I've used monorepos, and I haven't, and for me, it's darn near a flip of a coin. I don't know. I feel like they probably, in some cases, have been ultimately worth it for me, but I've always questioned whether the pain was worth it. It's hard to do well. I'll say that. Okay, so let's talk about another law. The fundamental theorem of software engineering says that we can solve any problem by introducing another layer of abstraction. Software architects, or I might say actually architectural astronaut is the term that I would think about here. People that want to abstract all the things. I remember reading the book Head First Design Patterns, and before that, the Gang of Four book. And as I learned those patterns, I started going, all right, where can I use this? I got to find a spot in the code where I can jam this pattern in. And that's the exact opposite of the mindset that we should have. These are tools, and no carpenter walks into your house with a hammer just going, show me a nail somewhere. I'm going to hit this thing. And how is that helpful? It's not. So patterns are useful, but be careful about overuse. These lead to more indirection. That is the cost of a lot of these things. Kevlin Henney, who's a fellow speaker, says all problems can be solved by another level, but the problem of too many layers. That's the thing. At some point you've added, and every time I solve a problem, yes, I've added in a queue, I've added in a cache, I've added in an API, and so on. Yes, I'm solving a problem, but I've also created some new problems. Now I need more people that are specializing in this and can maintain it. What do we do when that new layer falls down? So I actually worked with an over-abstractor. I remember this was back in the days of React had just come out, and he was concerned about whether it was going to pan out or not because Angular was really it was a safer bet at that point. But it was my call since I was principal, and I said, no, I think React's going to be big. Let's go this way. But he said, well, I think what we should do is abstract away React. We'll just put a layer in front of it, and then we could pivot over to Angular later if we want. And I just tilted my head, and I thought, what in the world? Like, what would that even look like? No, that's over-abstractor. There's also a risk on the other side, though. You could be an under-abstractor, and I've been guilty of both of these many times in my career. Copying and pasting is an example of under-abstracting. I'll just copy and paste everywhere, and at some point, that doesn't scale so well. Another example is if you create a class just called stuff, things, utilities, that tends to just attract a bunch of code. That's under-abstracting. You've also heard about dry. Dry is one of those ideas that, again, people hear early in their career and they go, oh, okay, so I will never copy and paste ever. That's always wrong, right? No. Copy and paste is useful, but keep in mind that if you take dry too far, you end up with this problem called reduced locality of behavior. In other words, it is easier to read the code when the behavior is close rather than far away. It's easier to read code that reads top down than jumping through a bunch of functions. So that's some of the trade that you're making there. So as a consultant, this is actually the law that I reference the most, and lots of you have probably heard of it before. Conway's law says that organizational structure affects the system structure. And this seems to come up really all the time. Conway said that any organization that designs a system will produce a design whose structure is a copy of the org's communication structure. Now, long ago, I was working at an automotive company, and we had this giant monolith We had a bunch of developers, and at some point we hit 15, 20 developers, and it started to become rather difficult for anybody to understand the whole system. There was too much code, too much complexity, so we didn't really have anybody that felt like they were subject matter experts on the whole picture. And we were also at the point where one delivery team was just too much. We needed to split up. So what we did was what's called the reverse Conway maneuver. We decided to split up the team and then give everybody a responsibility, say, all right, Cory, your team gets this tab at the top. John, your team gets this. Sally, your team gets this tab. So that put us in a situation where Conway's law actually works for us. Because you can imagine that I gave you a team and you said, this slice of the software is yours. What's the next thing you want to do? Now you go into the code and you're like, okay, I've got to find where that code is, and I don't want to cordon that off, and let's put it in a spot where we can say this is our responsibility. So you're going to re-architect the code, and maybe you're going to move in the direction of, okay, we've got services for our team, and they've got services for their team, and now we've got clear APIs so we don't step on each other's toes, and also we think about sharing between. So Conway's law really just comes up a lot. And that reverse Conway maneuver, what I was just referring to, is splitting a team. Now, I'll see this on the other side, too. Sometimes I've seen the sad fact, one of my clients, they have people in Argentina and in Egypt. And because of the crazy time differential there, they basically don't talk to each other. There is a 30-minute stand-up in the morning where the people in Egypt join, and then they're done for the night. So it's really hard for them to communicate. And since they're supposed to be the same team, this really doesn't work out well. And what we moved in the direction of was, let's just have two separate teams here, because there's enough people on each side. If we divide their responsibilities, then overlap isn't such a problem. They can do their own things without stepping on each other's toes. Because it wasn't like we needed 24-hour-a-day progress on the big picture. They could each work on a separate piece of the puzzle. And a Harvard study found that product developed by loosely coupled orgs are significantly more modular. So that's exactly what Conway's law is talking about. If I said in here, all right, guys, we're going to build a piece of software, team 1, team 2, team 3, you can imagine we're going to try to create a 3-tier system of some sort so that we can have control over the things that are our responsibility. Okay, third law. Let's talk about McLuhan's law. We shape our tools, and thereafter, our tools shape us. So this comes up all over the place. If you've got a monolith, then you're probably going to have one large team. So that's actually an example of Conway's law in effect right there. You'll structure that way. If I'm working in static types, I tend to think in types. In fact, when I'm in a typed language, I often like to write the types first and kind of stare at them and think about whether they reflect the structure that I'd like, and then so it's almost a type-first thinking for me. Automated testing causes me to think in edge cases. I think about, what if it's empty? What if it's null? What if they forget to pass this in? Those things come up. So the tools are affecting my behavior. This is another example of McLuhan's law. So this is my office. On the left-hand side, you can see I've got my desk powered down, but it's a motorized desk. And on the right-hand side, I have it powered up. Now take a guess. In the morning, which way do I have it structured? Down or up? People say up. The reason I have it up is because tools shape us. And I know that if I walk in the morning and it's down, I will sit down, and I don't know when I'm going to ultimately think, oh, I should probably stand up and get on the treadmill and walk some. No, in the morning, I have the most self-control. I also walk in, and the easy thing is the right thing, which is I want to start my day just doing some steps and checking my email and get started at work. So I always have the desk up at the end of the day, even though, or I should say I always have the desk up at the end of the day, but I do that the night before. I make sure that I put it back up if I'm sitting at the end of my workday. So the next morning it's there. My tools are shaping my behavior. Next one, Goodhart's law. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. Can anybody think of an example? You can yell it out. This is where it's different for me to be in Europe, because in America, I would have gotten like 8 different people yelling it out. But number of issues solved. Thank you. Yes, so that is one example. Anybody ever done story points? Another example, story points are fine until you tell Team A that, hey, Team B did twice as many story points last week. You guys have really got to step up your game. What have you done now? Now you've taken a measurement and you made it a target, at which point people are going, all right, well, I'll just double my story point numbers. If that makes you happy, we're going to have story point inflation like the government. It's not a good outcome. This happens all the time, and this is, to me, this is probably one of the most important laws. And the implications of this are really interesting too, because when I was a manager, I found myself wanting to manage people using these sorts of metrics, which might be a statement about how good I was as a manager, honestly. I wanted to draw that way. But I learned over time that these are not useless, but they are a risk. And if you tell me the number of tickets that you closed, the number of pull requests that you've opened, it's not that that tells me nothing. So there is something there, but I certainly can't focus on just that. And imagine if I told my team, okay, guys, I just want you to know right now, what I'm paying attention to is the number of pull requests that you open. What are they going to start doing? All right, tiny pull requests all day long. You know, oh, I found a comment. I'm going to reword the comment, and I'll put in a pull request, a little change. I'll create a bug, and then I'll fix it a few minutes later, and we'll do more. No, that's awful. How about hours in the office? I monitored this, but I never told anybody that I was, but I would pay attention. If somebody was gone most of the time, of course I'd notice that. And if somebody was there before me every day, I would notice that too. I'm like, that's really admirable, because I'm getting up early and you're actually beating me to the office every day. Humans will notice it, but that's only part of the story. And, you know, the problem with these sorts of things is like laid out in a cartoon, that ultimately if you create these sorts of situations, you can end up with people that are gaming the system just for their own good. You've probably heard about the Cobra effect, where they were trying to get rid of cobras, and they say, all right, we'll pay you for every cobra that you bring in so that we can solve the cobra problem. What did people start doing? They start breeding cobras so they can bring more cobras in and get money out of that. It actually exacerbated the problem. This happens with government all the time because of this little idea of second-order effects. And I know this is a sidebar. It's not in the slides, but I would encourage you. A lot of the things that we do in life are useful because of the second-order effects. Like I'm standing up here on stage, like I didn't get paid to do this talk, but I do feel like the second-order effects are going to be great. Like maybe some business will come out of that. Maybe I'll get better. The fact that I created these slides helped me learn more and collect my own thoughts. Second-order effects are really powerful. Bill Gates said that measuring programming progress by lines of code is like measuring aircraft progress by weight. Yeah, we want less there. We've got to be careful about what we measure. What you measure tends to be managed. And so you might look at this stuff back here and think, okay, so developers should never be measured by these things. No, I actually think these are valid, but I think they're a piece of the puzzle. So the difference here, this is my encouragement to you. If you're in a situation where you're measuring people, do not disclose that you're paying attention to these things. It's more or less implied anyway. I mean, to give you an extreme example, I had a client who came to me and I had said that one of my coworkers seemed to basically be doing a different job and was occasionally showing me their side work. And they would never be available for meetings, and I'd try to message them and hours could go by. He eventually showed me his report. He said, we keep track of the number of pull requests that everybody does. And he said, I just want to tell you, you're part-time with us, and you're number 3 in the list of pull requests, and the count of the number of pull requests. So we're really happy with that. I was very excited to see that. And then he said, so the guy that you mentioned, he's down here. He's done 3 pull requests in the whole year, the entire year. I go, okay, well, that is something. That's signal. Now, there could be a reason. Everybody can acknowledge there could be a reason, but it seems unlikely that that would be the whole story. But watch out, because fixation on hard numbers may actually reduce quality. That's the risk here. Now, I want to pivot for a second. Let's talk about life, because this rule also applies to life. And being honest, I have focused on money a lot in my career as an adult. I think growing up, I always wished we had more. I remember I wanted nice shoes. I wanted to travel. We didn't have the money for that. When my parents would say things like, money doesn't grow on trees, what do you think, I'm made out of money? Like, they weren't lying. We didn't have a lot. So that drove me as an adult to try to be successful. And it made me pay a lot of attention to my salary and my net worth. That's a real risk because these are easy to measure, but once those things become a target, it can create really odd behavior. And you can get myopically focused on how do I get more money, or how do I get more power, whatever it may be, whatever your issue is. Now, these are hard numbers, which makes them easy to measure, but the problem is fixation on these measurements can reduce your quality of life if you go too far on any one of these. So this is where I'm going to be pretentious and name a law after myself. We're going to talk about House's law. My last name's House. So House's law is this. Yeah, I'm the pretentious dude, bro, right here. So the things most worth measuring are the hardest to measure. The things most worth measuring are the hardest to measure. And this is often true in software too. Like user satisfaction, like how happy are our users actually using this software, is a difficult thing to measure. We can measure how fast the page loads. We can track how many features we have, but how happy are our users? So when we're measuring developer productivity, if we're going to properly measure it, what if instead we thought about this? I want somebody who's reliable, has a positive attitude, is a team player, they have a growth mindset, they write good code that people can understand, and they're humble enough to say, I don't know. Like that's huge. I love in an interview when somebody says, I don't know. I go, good, I was hoping we'd get there at some point. Like, don't BS me, just be honest. There's nothing wrong with saying you don't know. And extra credit if after that you say, so what is the answer? And if you seem genuinely curious, fantastic, because we're all learning. We all learned in a different, weird, topsy-turvy path, so it's totally understandable that we're going to have gaps. Yes?
Is it not the same as mindset? Mindset.
Oh, Mindset the book?
No, but I mean, how the attitude,
Yes.
all these small little things that make you human and colleague and defines you.
Yeah, exactly. You were talking about the importance of mindset. And when you said mindset, I was actually thinking about the book Mindset, which I think I mentioned in here anyway. But in short, I'll just say as a side note, a wonderful book that really talks about the idea of having a growth mindset rather a fixed mindset. Like I used to have a fixed mindset that said, oh, I could never speak to people. And then at some point I came around to a growth mindset and said, oh, okay, maybe I could learn to be a public speaker one day. So let's talk about measuring personal success properly. Instead of the hard numbers, well, it's relationships. That's really hard to measure. Like Warren Buffett had one of my favorite descriptions of success. He said, it's if the people that you want to love you, love you. And I love that because it's so objectively true. Like imagine that you had all the wealth in the world and the people that you want to love you hate your guts. Like how happy could you possibly be? And on the other hand, if you had nothing, but the people that love you, like there's a future there. There's something hopeful. Relationships are huge. Growth is another thing. Contribution. How much contribution could I have? Do people trust me? How much autonomy do I have as a person? And most important, am I happy? Like you can make yourself absolutely miserable trying to get a certain set of metrics right. But if it's making you miserable, then maybe your ladder is propped up against the wrong wall. That's the idea. So the thing is, the reason I say House's law here is, these are what we should actually be paying attention to, but boy, all of this is hard to measure. Like, I can tell you, I'm definitely happier than I was years ago because these things matter more to me than fixating on those hard numbers now. Now, I want to clarify that measurement isn't bad or good. It's just we've got to avoid focusing myopically on them and ask what's most important but impossible to measure. Okay, next. Let's talk about Hick's law. This looks like quite a user interface. Very impressive. This would do all of the things. Now, the problem is, the more options that a user has, the longer that it takes them to make a decision. And you've probably felt this when you've downloaded some powerful software. I feel this way if I go try some new video editing software, because they all have significantly different interfaces, and I go, whoa, there is a lot here to learn. And it's very different than the previous one that I interacted with. So Hick's law says that more options leads to a slower decision. So you've probably heard the saying, less is more, and quality does not necessarily increase with functionality. More features means more decisions, and more features also mean more code. So you get the sense of all these trade-offs. One of my favorite books was called The Paradox of Choice, and Barry Schwartz has a TED Talk. You don't have to read the book, you can just watch the TED Talk. And the point that he makes is that choice doesn't make us freer, it actually makes us more paralyzed. He even tells the story of being in a grocery store and somebody sets up a table and they put a bunch of jellies out on the table. And they had dozens of different flavors sitting there. So people would walk up and look at it and go, I mean, I could try any of them, but there's so many, I'm just sort of overwhelmed. I think I'll just move on. What they found was it was better if they just put 2 jellies out, because people go, oh, I could choose between grape and strawberry, but give me all this, it's too much. This happens all the time. There have been studies that have shown this very thing. This is part of why marriage tends to make people happier, is you have now constrained your options. And I could tell you, before I got married, I was very hesitant. My wife and I dated for 3 years until she finally said, all right, it's decision time. And I went, all right, I was waiting for you to say that. Let's go. Let's do it. But I'm just very hesitant about big decisions that can't be easily reversed. I went, okay, we're good. But after that, I've been really happy because I'm no longer questioning my decision. I am all in. And trust me, we fight and we argue, and there are times that we don't get along, but we're in it for the long haul. So I know we've got to talk it through and find a path forward. So this choice, this commitment is useful. Same thing happens if somebody offers you, there's a study that did this. They offered people a choice of 3 paintings. You can choose that painting, but they did something interesting. For half the group, they said, you can take that painting, just take it home, and if you change your mind in the next week, you can bring it back. Well, hardly anybody brought it back, but what they found was a week later when they checked satisfaction, the people who were told they could bring the painting back were less satisfied with it than the people that they said, no, give back. See, this is the moment right here. You got to pick one of these 3 and then it's yours. Because what happens in your head is the moment it's yours, you start reasoning. You're like, yeah, this is definitely the best one. Oh, this one's great. I am super happy with my decision because I can't change it anyway. So I might as well be. Like, we're weird, you know. Humans are funny that way. Here's an example of choice. Steve Jobs understood the paradox of choice. Back when Steve Jobs came back to his company, back to Apple, they had all these SKUs, and it was ridiculous. He couldn't figure out exactly how they'd ended up in that situation, so he goes up to the board and just draws these lines and says, look, we're going to have consumer, pro, desktop, laptop. 4 things. Everybody understands that. Are you a consumer? Here's your 2 options. Are you pro? Here's your 2 options. That was part of the recipe that finally led to Apple and their ascendance, was this simplicity. People understood that. Now, Apple has unfortunately slid away from this a bit. Now we have a ridiculous number of SKUs and lots of things. Like, I can't imagine that anybody thought, oh, I'd really like an Apple iPhone, but, you know, they didn't sell it in Seafoam, so I'll just get an Android. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but I don't know. They're doing very well for themselves, but that's the idea. Okay, here's a fun one that has probably impacted everybody in this room. The next law is Cunningham's law. To get the right answer, post the wrong one. I don't actually recommend doing this. People will get annoyed by it, but I have been on social media for a lot of years. I use it heavily. And I am absolutely comfortable with posting an opinion, saying, hey, I found this thing. This is a pattern. I found it really useful. I think this is the way to go, so that people can quickly say, what? Have you not seen this? You should try this. You should try this. And the nature of people is interesting. If I merely ask a question, most people won't answer me. But if I say this is the right way and I sound pretty dogmatic and comfortable with it, everybody wants to say, well, actually, and that's what Cunningham's law is. It's really useful because now you are effectively you're giving somebody a chance to kind of flex their ego and show, yeah, maybe I know something you don't know. So avoid this thing on the left. Avoid asking questions on social media, and instead start using social media to your advantage. Post, here's what I did. And I've done this so many times. This is actually, I think, part of how I built a good following on Twitter, was just consistently every day I would learn something. I would read something. I would make a mistake and I would share it, and then Cunningham's law comes in and I learned more along the way. So this is an example. Like I had a client and their CI build time was over 12 minutes long, and I did all these different things to get the build time down to about 3 minutes. I was really excited about it, and I listed a dozen different things that we did. But then, what's the response? Well, right away, all these people come in and say, well, actually, you could do this. Here's another thing. I see that you didn't list this. You might consider. And I'm like, well, wonderful. This is called free consulting. Like, I didn't pay them anything, but they are happy to help me out because, again, humans are funny that way. All right, let's talk about another law, the law of diminishing returns. And having a picture of Bugatti here is perfect. I think we could all agree that this is well beyond the point of diminishing returns. It is a fantastic machine, amazing. But, I mean, honestly, you could have a lot of fun in a Toyota Supra, and you could have how many Supras for the money? I don't even know. A lot of them. And still go out for a nice meal afterwards. And this comes up all the time. In tech, it's automated testing. Like, is 100% test coverage really worth it, or is 90 sufficient? Where is this point where we're really hitting diminishing returns? Staying on the latest versions. Should I be updating my NuGet packages every single day? No. Should I do that once a year? Well, that's probably not enough. There's a point of diminishing returns. There's a curve in here to consider. Pair programming is another one of those things. I will hear people that they will say, we should always pair. And I go, always? Really? Do you want people to quit? Like, if you told me I always had to pair programming, I would not do that. Most developers have this certain amount of willingness, at which point they're like, all right, I've had enough social time. I want headphones on, and they're going to be loud, and then I'm going to code some more. And it's completely reasonable. Another one in here is conferences. When I started speaking at conferences and I started turning the corner where it actually got fun to be on stage, one year I spoke at 17 conferences, and I was traveling all over the place. I was in Europe a couple times that year. I was in Canada, and I was enjoying it, but my wife was not. And that's understandable. I had passed the point of diminishing returns. I wasn't really getting much more out of it, so I had to find a balance there. This happens with house and car too. Like, it is so sad when you see somebody who has completely put like shackles on their legs. They can't possibly move anymore because they had to have this car they couldn't afford. I remember doing that in college, and I thought, oh, this is going to make me happy. No, what it did was it stressed me out. It was awful because I couldn't afford the thing that I'd bought. But I wanted to flex. I wanted to show this. It wasn't worth it. I mentioned this example. How much time should I spend trying to fix a type? How often should we meet? Oh, this is a good one. Do I have a slide for this? Yes. We do not need daily stand-ups. We just need to talk regularly. We don't need mandatory retrospectives to be agile. We just need to regularly discuss what's working and what isn't. We don't need a mandatory weekly meeting for that. Notice that I'm fixating on the actual activity. So we don't necessarily need all that rigor and structure. And daily might not be the right cadence. Maybe multiple times a day is the right cadence to talk to your coworkers. It's just a forced moment. Or maybe less than that could work. It really does depend. Another example of diminishing returns, like, I love cars, so I bring in these sorts of things. I can't help but think, okay, we've got a $19,000 car, $100,000 car. You know, if aliens came down from the sky, it really wouldn't matter. They would say, I don't care. They're the same. I'll just destroy either of them. That's the way it works. It's not an actual noticeable difference from the outside from anybody with just a cursory knowledge of the whole thing. Another example is computers. Okay, do I want the $4,000 computer or the $53,000 Mac Pro? Is it worth 15 times the money? Diminishing returns are kicking in here pretty obviously. So we have to ask, where is that point? Okay, the last little part of the talk here, we're going to do some exercises. Because now we've got these tools. I just talked through 9 or 10 different laws. So what I want to emphasize is, let's use them for a second. These are the laws that I just went through. If you want to take a picture, this is a nice summary of the laws I did, but we're going to pivot over into using these for a moment now. And I will share a link to the slides at the end if you want the whole slide deck instead, so you can have reference to these. Okay, feel like paparazzi here. This is great. Lots of cameras. Okay, I'll show at the end too. I will show it again, so don't worry. So automated testing. What laws apply that we just talked about when you're thinking about automated testing? Diminishing returns, yes. Yeah, I'd mentioned that one before. Is that the first one? Another one in here, the first law of ecology. You can never change just one thing. The moment that you start writing automated tests, now, okay, you do have more test coverage, but that also means every time you change your code, now you got to go change your tests too. You're paying some cost for that. Also, our tools shape us, which I'd mentioned before. I now have these tests that are causing me to think in terms of edge cases rather than happy paths. And although I didn't talk about this one, the Bennett principle talks about the idea that the more energy you invest, the more value you get out of a task. This also applies on vacation. I find when I'm on vacation, I can sit on the beach for a little while, but after very long, we got to get up and do something. Let's go on a hike. Let's go have activities, and it applies there. Same with automated testing. And yes, someone mentioned the law of diminishing returns. At a point, we're going to say, I think we have sufficient coverage. We have sufficient confidence. Sometimes 100% is absolutely necessary. Other times, there's probably a diminishing return to consider. I mean, often when I meet with a team and I say, tell me about your team's testing strategy, this is their response, which is admittedly concerning. It is funny how often I meet with a team and they more or less admit, we think testing is important, we know we should be doing it, we wish we had tests, but we don't. And why we don't, I don't know, there's lots of reasons. I think not the least of which is people feel the pressure to deliver, to stay moving, to keep delivering features on a regular basis, and there's this question of, will tests actually move me forward? And also, to some degree, do I even have permission to do this thing? Now, I'll share something rather controversial here, which is I have interacted with teams and developers who would quietly tell me that the reason they don't write tests is they're afraid they'd get in trouble. And that is a sad fact, and I get it, but my controversial take is, do not ask permission to do your job well. I don't ask permission to write tests because that is something that I know I need to do my job well, and I believe that. And in the end, somebody didn't hire me to write code, they hired me for my judgment. And part of my judgment is knowing when I should commit, when I should refactor, when I've sufficiently covered this code. So that's why I don't ask permission. And I recognize that that can be a situation where some people look at it and go, well, I need to ask permission, I can't risk it. I get it. It's just my personal thing. So automated testing is a benefit-cost type of scenario. You have to decide, okay, are the benefits over here worth the cost? And this is constantly changing based on how much you've done. How many unit tests, integration tests, end-to-end tests, the matrix between them, the balance of all of those. It's not easy. And also, you've got to consider the context of, are you a large team? It's impractical to test it manually. Are you really thinking long-term? Is it likely to change a lot? Versus the other side of things here, like, are you just a single dev? Well, or maybe it's small enough to test manually, low criticality, low complexity. Maybe it's just short-term. I've written code that had to work for Christmas, just over the Christmas season, and then we're throwing it out. It was a one-time use. Probably don't worry about automated tests. It's just like a little fun thing that we threw in there. Context matters. Okay, this is the most controversial part of the talk. If you walk out and flip a chair, I won't be surprised, but here we go. I want to talk about multiple monitors, everybody, because laws apply to this, and I feel like we all need to talk. This is important stuff. You can't change just one thing. When you add another monitor to your desk, you have changed multiple things. The more options that you have, the longer it will take you to make a decision. When I add a seventh monitor up above over here, I may not have actually improved my productivity. There are probably diminishing returns, and my tools that I use, they tend to shape me. All of this matters. You see how these laws, they apply all over the place. It's very interesting. So let's talk about this for a second. Imagine that you're going to put on a headset. How many monitors, virtual monitors, would you have in that headset? Would you want your headset to look like that? Because you could. You absolutely could. But would this be better? I think we sometimes just get really fixated on, oh, more physical hardware is definitely better, right? I'm not so sure. Like, does this look like a place to focus, to get something done? Here's the way I think about it. As a developer, we basically do three things. We read, we write, and we think. That's it. So the question is, if I'm going to read, write, and think, what is the right hardware for that? So, is this better? This was my screen when I had a ultra wide and I was able to split it 4 ways. And I was pretty proud how I could see my Gmail, see my Slack, I could have the website that I was building, and then my code up here at the top. And man, I am a badass. You know, you really feel cool about it. But the thing is, seeing all this at once makes it hard to read, write, and think. I'm constantly distracted by checking my email because it's visual, or Slack pings that are popping up, or maybe social media is sitting over here. So these are my apparently unpopular opinions. I say that because I walk through businesses all the time and see lots of monitors on people's desks. When I'm reading, I don't want to see anything else. When I've got a book in my hand, I take my phone and I put it somewhere else in my house. Because if my phone is on me, I'll find myself looking at it when I meant to sit here and read. Multiple monitors create that same risk. When I'm writing, I don't want to see anything else. I have it full screen. I'm just looking at text. And when I'm thinking, I want to be away from the machine altogether. So this is how my code looks. Notice how I'm in Zen mode. All you can see is code. Code and lines of code. I can't see the bottom taskbar. I can't see the top. I can't see the time. Just code. When I am reading, this is the way that I have my machine configured. Full screen, white, black text. It's like looking at a book. No distractions again. And when I'm thinking, I just leave my desk. If I want to think, I'm going to go on a walk. I'm going to get away from my desk. Movement helps us be more creative. Have you ever heard the old saying, like, walking doesn't solve everything, but I've never seen a problem that got worse by walking. Like, just go on a walk. Wonderful book that really challenged me in this area was a book by Cal Newport, Deep Work. And he makes the point that more than ever, we are distracted like crazy. So if you are one of the people that can do what I just showed here, like figure out how to do clear thinking, how to read without getting interrupted, how to write code without constantly checking social media, you have a huge advantage because now you're somebody who can do deep work in a distracted world. So Cal Newport practices what he preaches. He is not on any social media, but the dude is very successful. He's a professor. He's authored multiple books. He's occasionally on podcasts. I really like his stuff. Like, imagine that the opposite of this. Like, I'm sitting here with multiple monitors in a noisy room like this. I hated this. I had to deal with this at one point, and it was a situation where I realized I had to either change my job or change my job, as in either I get moved to an office where I'm not constantly dealing with all of this, or I just need to find another job. It was a really big deal to me. And yeah, open offices, just as a side note, they sure are saving people a lot of money, but I'm not sure that it actually saves money given all the distractions that can come up. So multiple monitors are a trade-off. You get to see lots of things, switch focus quickly, and just look like you are the most productive person on your team. Great, but it makes it harder to read, write, and think in some cases. Yes, there are times that I've really enjoyed being able to see the docs, see the DB, see my code, correlate all this together, but I tend to just use gestures to jump between things, or I will split the screen in rare cases. It has its use, but can lead to more distractions, more window management. So I just want to point out, oh yeah, and friction when traveling. Like, I'm so used to one monitor that I'm also very comfortable on a plane or at a hotel or in a coffee shop because it's just one laptop monitor. Well, yeah, the list goes on. Lots of downsides with multiple monitors. So I actually say this whole thing to be clarified, tongue-in-cheek. If you like them, keep them. I just want you to see this is a fun way to use some of the laws because the laws apply literally everywhere in life. So in summary, let's go over here. I'll share the link here in a second. Remember Shipley's 6 dimensions. These are the trade-offs that we make in software today. And when you increase one of these, ask, okay, which one is now going down, and are we okay with that? These are the other laws that we looked at, and I've already shown this. So you can get this from the slides as well, and I'll share a link to that. I would encourage you, if you want exceptional results in life, then you've got to be comfortable being weird. So I'm not saying you have to be milquetoast and in the middle on all these things. I have had a great career by going particularly hard in particular areas, being very specific rather than general. So that is useful. Just recognize that there are trade-offs in there. And try to avoid saying always and never, and listen when someone else says that. Have a conversation. Say, but what are the downsides? What are the risks there? Watch out for dogma. Ask, what's the trade-off? What do I have to give up for this thing? You can find me on social. I'm House Core. I publish courses at DomeTrain and Pluralsight. Just published a couple new TypeScript courses out on DomeTrain. And I have a bunch of React courses over on Pluralsight. My consultancy is reactjsconsulting.com. I help teams in the front end. So if you happen to be doing any of that, I'd love to work with you. And I'm hoping I challenge your thinking here. And if you don't want your monitor, well, let me know. I'm interested. No. Anyway, I hope you guys had fun, and I look forward to hanging out at the party. Enjoy the conference.